last video, we saw how we can install the Jupyter Notebook. Now, let's understand a few things let's understand the first steps, the basics of Python, and we can just learn that you can learn that along with me. Let me go back. Let me start with desktop once again, the Python videos, and then let me go on to new Python 3 notebook. Let me understand something called as variables. You all know what is a variable in Python. What is a variable? A variable is nothing but something which stores some data, some name, and then you will be able to use that variable whenever you want. Like say, for example, you want to store something in you want to store something in your kitchen or somewhere. You want to store something, let's say a lot of things you have, like salt, pepper, sugar, a lot of things that you would want to store. What would you do? You would put them in containers, right? And whenever you want to salt, you have a container which is named as salt. You open that, okay, take it out, take out the salt and use it, right? In the similar fashion, you want to store something like name, the age, the roll number, stuff like that. You want to store different types of information. You store them in something called as variables. Now, a variable in Python though is very different from a variable in other programming languages. What is the difference? A variable in Python is a reference to an object. So I'm going to put that in a markdown here. A markdown is something where you can write code, where you can write something like how would you write down in notebook. So I'm going to change this cell into a markdown instead of a code, and I'm going to write here. Okay, I'm going to write here saying, first of all, if you want a heading like thing, you can put a hash or a small one hash, a bigger heading. I'm just going to say understanding variables. Okay, and all I'm going to say is in variables, what I'm going to say, a variable in Python is nothing but a reference to an object. What do I mean? A variable in Python. So when I press now Shift Enter or Alt Enter, you can see how it came in a bookish format, right? That's why a Jupyter Notebook can be used for writing comments, for doing something like that. Okay. But if you put a hash in a code syntax, it means it's a comment in the code. So if I say this is a comment in Python, this is not in the markdown, but this is in a code. This will not get executed. So whatever you want in Python code to be as a comment, you're going to put it with a hash. All right. So now coming to what is a variable? A variable is nothing but a reference to an object in Python. What does it mean? It means when you create a variable in Python, okay, when you say a variable, let's say for example, I'm going to say a is equal to 2. This is how you create a variable in Python. So which means you're saying a value 2 is going to be assigned to a, right? 2 is going to be stored in a variable whose name is a. But this is not exactly what Python does. Python says 2 is an object of a class. Object of a class. What does it mean? Let's say for example, if you have something like spoon, fork, plate, all of them come into all of them come under the class called as utensils. All of these are objects of type class utensils. Whereas if you would say something like soap, oil, or any of them, they would come under the type of a particular class called as bathing essentials or something like that, right? Now in the similar fashion, if you talk about numbers like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they come under a particular class, and that would be a class of, the class would be integer. Is that very clear? So you have, and the class of all these numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of them are integers. So we call them as objects of a particular class, objects of class integer. Whereas 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 5.6, 7.7, these are decimal numbers. They come under something. They come under a class called as float. Okay, so they are objects of type class float. Now, when I say a variable is a reference to an object, whenever you say a is equal to 2, what exactly happens? 2 gets stored in the memory of the computer. It gets stored in a particular location in the memory. and that memory location is going to have an address. That address is going to be stored in A, which means A is not going to store the value directly, which means let's say the container is not going to contain salt directly, but every variable is something like this. Every variable is going to store a reference or an address to an object. So that means whenever you say A is equal to 2, you are creating an object 2 of type class integer, and that object 2 is stored in the memory with a particular address, and that address is stored in A. So A is, what is it holding? It is actually holding the address of this object 2. So when you say print A, it actually calls that particular variable. So basically it finds out at this particular address what is the value and then prints it out. Okay. But if you want to know what is the actual address, you're going to write a function called as type. A type function will tell you what is the address that A is actually holding for A is holding the address to which that object is being pointed to. So you are saying type of A, and then when I say type of A, it says integer. Can you see it's a class integer? But sorry, if you want to know the type, I'm so sorry. If you want to know the object type, it is stored in type of A. But if you want to know the address, you have to use another function called as ID. I made a mistake. So now when you say ID of A, it is nothing but the reference or the address which A is holding. But if you say type, it means the type of that particular variable which is being created or that object being created. Similarly, you can say B is equal to 3.3, shift enter, type of B would be what? Float. Would be float. And then, of course, you can print B whenever you want. You can use B whenever you want. And variable has this property of being used whenever you want. You have stored it in a variable, use it whenever you want. Let's say B multiplied by 29.7. You can use this whenever you want in your particular code. You can have another type of variable called as a string, which can be defined in double quote. It is something like my name, okay, Elijah Matthew. All the enters. So now you have C. If you say what is the type of C, it is nothing but Elijah Matthew. Now, something interesting in Python. If I say A is equal to 2, and if I say B is equal to 2, okay, can you tell me? Sorry, I need to put this. Yeah, B is equal to 2. Tell me what happens. A will be 2, B will be 2. But let me just print what is the ID of A and what is the ID of B. Can you please have a look and see that both the IDs of A and B, both of them are same, which means A and B both are storing the reference to the same object. But I didn't say B is equal to A. Yeah, but in Python, whenever you create an object, let's say you have created an object 2, and A is storing the address to that particular object 2. When you say B is equal to 2, it searches if there is already an object 2. And if there is an object 2, what will it do? B will also store the address for that same object. So now A and B are both holding the same address to this object 2. You can check that by using the keyword is. A is B, true, which means both the addresses are true. Is that very clear? This is how you can understand how both of them store. Now if I make A is equal to 3, what happens? A will now store a particular value 3, which is of type integer, but A is now storing what? It is not storing the value, but it's storing the address of that particular new value. Has the address of B changed? No. So if I now print B, it will be 2 will be. ID of B will be the same as before, but ID of A will have changed. So the reference which is stored in A is different. Is that very clear? This is about two different variables. Okay, a variable storing a reference to an object. Finally, the last thing in Python. If I have stored in A2, I can change the value of A by saying 3.3. You couldn't do this in other programming languages. You couldn't have a variable storing multiple data types. but here you can. If I say a is equal to 3.3, I run that again, store it, print it a, what is the value? 3.3. I can store a as ask Elijah, and again, it's the same thing which happens. A will now store an integer, also a string. Is that very clear? With this, we have understood about variables. How to deal with variables more in detail will come to in the following sessions. Stay tuned.